I'm about to show you one of the wackiest, rarest smartphones Samsung has ever made. It's a phone that has shaped Samsung's entire future, and so just before we unbox it, let me give you a little bit of context. You might remember the Samsung Galaxy Round from 2013, the first commercially available smartphone in the world with a flexible AMOLED display. And you can see the logic behind it. The curved back would, in theory, make the phone more comfortable to hold by complementing the shape of your palm, and the curved screen would offer a similar viewing experience to some of the highest-end TVs at the time. The idea of this kind of display is that instead of a flat panel that just sort of blasts light both at you and around you, a curved panel directs that light into the user's eyes, in the same way that they'd see things in the world around them. It reduces distortion. Just generally, this was a really exciting time in the smartphone market. Yes, true, the standard formula for a smartphone had already been established, but companies were still feeling their way into what direction the future was headed in, experimenting with ideas and concepts. Anyways, the Round completely failed. It sold less than 100,000 units in the first month, in large part because it was 30% more expensive than almost every other phone out there for a benefit that very few people could reason with. This was that novelty phone, that device that everyone wanted to look at, to talk about, but nobody actually wanted to sink their money on one. It kind of reminds me of that crazy Energizer smartphone that we took a look at a few months ago. There was insane interest in this product, this device that could supposedly last 50 days on one charge. The video I made on that is on like 4.5 million views, but when Energizer took this as a signal that loads of people were going to buy the phone, then things went a bit wrong. They actually created a full-scale campaign, a Kickstarter page behind it, and it just completely flopped and was cancelled pretty soon. Samsung was not proud of the Round, and have pretty much tried to scrub every trace of it from the internet. But whilst it's etched into people's brains as one of the biggest disasters Samsung has ever had, it may well be the most important mistake Samsung ever made. They needed to know how not to do a curve so they could learn how to do a curve. And that brings us to this, the Samsung Galaxy Note Edge, the successor to the Galaxy Round. And there's a very particular reason I'm making this video now, because looking forward, I think we're about to see this pattern repeat itself. Samsung's first generation foldable phone, the Galaxy Fold, is clearly not perfect. But just like the Round, I reckon the Samsung Galaxy Fold is going to be the device that we look at as the turning point, the pivot, the not quite right phone that will eventually lead to the device that people end up adopting. What the Galaxy Round did for curved displays, the Galaxy Fold will do for flexible displays. So that brings us onto the Note Edge, inside the box of which we get a micro USB cable, pretty standard at the time. You get a pair of earphones, which look slightly above average, but not close to Samsung's current AKG offering. There's also a 15-watt fast charger, which Samsung hasn't changed in the last 5 years. Okay, but this is a peculiar phone. It released alongside the Galaxy Note 4, and it's pretty similar, but with an extra 160 pixels on this curved panel, which gives it a super wide 16:10 aspect ratio. To give you an idea of just how wide this is, we can compare how much of my Instagram feed can be fit inside this versus a modern day tall phone, and it's not a lot. So, because this was the first iteration of a curve like this, there was going to be skepticism, and so it was kind of up to Samsung to convince people, to convince the public and the press that there was some sort of a use for this edge. So, even this early on, it was filled with equal parts features and gimmicks. Samsung sold this device as if it had two displays in one. They angled it as the ultimate productivity phone. One that could let you play a game whilst also keeping up to date with Twitter. It's pretty useful, and the timer and ruler features especially, you can see the appeal. But I think they really felt the need to flesh this out. So there were also a lot of bizarre features, like this burger flipping game. It is clearly pointless. It still demands your full attention, and so the only way I can see this being used over a proper game on the main screen is if you were trying to hide it from someone sitting on your left. A pretty niche scenario. But at the same time, it was clear that Samsung was serious about curves. They handed out an SDK so developers could make third-party applications just for it. Aside from the gimmicks though, the Note Edge was generally liked. It had the same top-tier components as the Note 4, a Snapdragon 805, 3 gigs of RAM, and the same 16-megapixel camera, capable of 4K video recording. It's got a plastic leather-like finish, but this was acceptable back in 2014, and to be honest, I don't hate the way it looks. And so, compared to the Galaxy Round, which got a little bit of flack for basically offering no major features above and beyond the cheaper Note 3, the general impression left by the Note Edge was a cooler-looking Note 4 with a few useful tricks. And that was enough. That was enough for Samsung to run with the idea. Now knowing that the convex curves we saw here had the potential to be a mainstream design, but one that would also differentiate them. This then led to these curves becoming standard on their phones, and they slowly phased in the idea by introducing separate edge variants of their devices all the way up to the Note 7, after which the standard phones were completely dropped, and every phone became an edge phone. Now, I know, not everybody is a fan of Samsung's current curves. They're easier to damage, they have difficulty with screen protectors, and you get accidental touches every now and again. And people continue to ask the question, what is the point? And yet, they've taken off, and my hunch is that this cycle is about to go full circle with the Fold. I reckon the second generation of the foldable device is going to be a big shift from the first and closer to the form factor that ends up sticking. Samsung has always loved experimenting, and whilst it is more efficient to let other companies do the innovating and then just kind of follow suit with something that's cheaper, kind of the strategy of OnePlus by the way, you'll never quite be at the bleeding edge unless you do the experiments yourself. And so, to round this off, I just want to say that it's a good example of how your biggest successes are sometimes just around the corner of your biggest failures. If you enjoyed this video, a sub would be massively appreciated, and I've got tons more interesting throwbacks like this on the channel, so I'll leave them linked from here. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.